My name is Taylor Miller. I'm 32, and I live in a quiet suburban neighborhood in Boise, Idaho. Thanksgiving has always been my favorite holiday. I love the cozy vibe, the good food, and the chance to catch up with friends. This year, I decided to host a small dinner for my closest friends. Nothing fancy, just a warm, intimate gathering at my place. I never expected the night to take the turn it did. The evening started perfectly. My friends, Emily, Rachel, and Jake, arrived around 6 p.m., and we spent hours eating, laughing, and sharing old stories. The turkey was perfect, the pumpkin pie was a hit, and the wine flowed freely. Outside, it was freezing, with the wind rattling the windows occasionally, but inside, the candles and soft music made everything feel safe and comforting. Around 9 p.m., as we were finishing dessert, something caught my eye. Through the dining room window, I noticed a car parked across the street. Its headlights were off, but the car hadn't been there earlier. It looked like someone was sitting inside. At first, I thought it might belong to a neighbor's guest, but something about the way it was positioned, half hidden under a large tree, didn't sit right with me. I didn't say anything at first, brushing it off as paranoia. But an hour later, when Rachel was leaving, I glanced outside again. The car was still there, and it hadn't moved an inch. "That's weird," Rachel said when I pointed it out. "Maybe it's someone waiting for a friend or just taking a break." She didn't seem too concerned, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. By the time Emily and Jake left, it was close to midnight. I was alone now, and the car was still parked in the exact same spot. It wasn't running, and whoever was inside hadn't moved. My curiosity got the better of me, so I walked to the front door to take a closer look. The porch light illuminated the street just enough for me to make out the driver. My stomach dropped when I saw him. It was a man, sitting completely still in the driver's seat, staring directly at my house. His face was partially shadowed, but I could make out his blank, almost emotionless expression. I slammed the door shut, locked it, and called the police immediately. As I explained the situation, I kept peeking through the curtains to make sure the car hadn't moved. The operator assured me that an officer would be dispatched, but by the time they arrived 20 minutes later, the car was gone. The officer took my statement and walked around the neighborhood, but there was no sign of the vehicle. "It's probably nothing," he said. "Maybe someone lost track of time or left when they saw the patrol car." I nodded, but his words didn't ease my growing paranoia. The next morning, I tried to shake it off. I convinced myself it was just some random person, nothing to worry about. Around noon, I went to the garage to take out the trash. But when I reached for the handle, I noticed something strange. The garage door was slightly open. I froze. I was absolutely certain I had closed it the night before. My heart started pounding as I slowly pushed the door open. The cold air inside sent a shiver down my spine. That's when I saw it. Lying on the floor, next to my workbench, was a knife. It wasn't one of mine. It was a large, sharp blade, the kind you'd see in a horror movie. My hands trembled as I backed away and immediately called the police again. 2 officers arrived within minutes and searched the entire house, top to bottom. They found no signs of forced entry and no one hiding inside. The only thing out of place was the knife. One officer suggested I might have forgotten to lock the garage, but I knew that wasn't true. I'm meticulous about locking doors, especially at night. That day, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching me. Every time I looked out the window, I expected to see that same car parked across the street. That night, I barely slept, jumping at every small creak or noise. The police couldn't find any leads. The knife was bagged as evidence, but without fingerprints or witnesses, there wasn't much they could do. The man in the car didn't come back. At least, not that I know of. But the thought that someone had been inside my garage, possibly watching me and my friends while we celebrated, kept me on edge. It's been a week now, and I've taken every precaution. I've installed security cameras, added extra locks, and even bought a motion-activated alarm for the garage. But none of it feels like enough. The image of that man sitting in the car, staring at my house, is burned into my memory. Thanksgiving will never feel the same again. It used to be my favorite holiday, a time for comfort and joy. Now, it's a reminder of how quickly things can turn sinister. I don't know who he was or what he wanted, but the knife on the garage floor proved one thing. He wasn't just watching. He was inside. My name is Rachel Bennett, and I'm 28 years old. I live in Seattle, Washington, and this year I spent Thanksgiving at my friend Erica's house. Erica and I had been close for years, and she recently moved to a quieter neighborhood in the suburbs with her husband, James. They invited me and a few others over for dinner. I thought it would be a simple, fun night, but I couldn't have been more wrong. The dinner started off like any other Thanksgiving gathering. The house smelled amazing, with the aroma of stuffing, cranberry sauce, and sweet potatoes filling the air. Erica had always been a great cook, and I knew she'd gone all out for the holiday. We all sat in the dining room, chatting and laughing while plates of food were passed around. But as we ate, I noticed something odd. The turkey, the centerpiece of every Thanksgiving meal, hadn't been brought out. We had everything else: mashed potatoes, green beans, and even gravy, but no turkey. At first, I didn't think much of it, but as the meal went on, it started to feel strange. Halfway through dinner, I decided to make a joke to lighten the mood. "So, where's the star of the show? Did the turkey go on strike this year?" I said with a laugh. The room went quiet. Erica's face turned pale, and she avoided eye contact. James was the one who answered, his voice unusually firm. "We had a little issue with it. It's not ready, so we decided to skip it." It felt like a weird response, but I didn't want to press further and make things awkward. Still, the tension in the room didn't go away. Erica was unusually quiet for the rest of the meal, barely eating and forcing smiles. After dinner, most of the guests gathered in the living room to watch a movie, but I went to the kitchen to grab my coat, which I had left hanging on a chair earlier. The kitchen was dark except for the faint light above the sink. As I stepped inside, I noticed something that stopped me in my tracks. On the counter were several blood-stained towels, hastily shoved to one side. The smell hit me next, something metallic, mixed with the faint aroma of raw meat. My eyes scanned the room and landed on the trash can. The lid was slightly open, and I could see what looked like the turkey inside. It wasn't fully cooked. Its skin was pale and rubbery, with juices pooling at the bottom of the trash bag. Before I could process what I was seeing, James appeared in the doorway. His presence startled me, and his tone was cold as he said, "You shouldn't be in here, Rachel." He stepped closer, blocking my view of the trash can. The turkey was ruined. "It's embarrassing, okay? Let's just drop it." His demeanor made my skin crawl. I mumbled an apology and quickly grabbed my coat, eager to get out of the house. As I rejoined the others in the living room, I noticed Erica sitting on the edge of the couch, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. She looked anxious, like she was waiting for something to happen. When it was time to leave, Erica hugged me tightly at the door. Her grip lingered a little too long, and she whispered, "Thanks for coming." Her voice was shaky, and when I looked into her eyes, I saw fear. Later that night, just as I was getting into bed, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Erica. It read, "I need to leave town. Don't come back to the house." My heart started racing. What did that mean? I tried calling her, but it went straight to voicemail. Something was very wrong. The next morning, I couldn't shake the unease. I decided to check the local news, hoping for some answers. That's when I saw the headline, "Body found in backyard of suburban home." My stomach dropped as I read further. The house in the report was Erica's. A neighbor had called the police after noticing freshly disturbed soil in their yard. When authorities dug it up, They found a body buried just a few feet below the surface. I felt sick. My mind raced back to the night before. The blood-stained towels, the discarded turkey, Erica's nervous behavior. It all started to make sense, and I wished it didn't. I tried reaching out to Erica again, but her phone was disconnected. I haven't heard from her since, and the police haven't released any more details about the case. All I know is that someone was killed and buried in their yard, and I can't stop wondering if Erica knew. Or worse, if James did. Thanksgiving used to be a time I looked forward to. Now, I can't think about it without remembering that night, the unease in Erica's eyes, and the turkey that never made it to the table. Ready to feel a chill run down your spine? Join us in the shadows and dive into the world of terrifying tales and creepy encounters. Subscribe now to Shivers in the Dark and hit the bell so you never miss a story that keeps you up at night. My name is Mark Harrison, and I'm 34 years old. I live with my wife, Jenna, and our 2 kids, Ellie and Ryan, in a quiet suburban neighborhood in Cedar Grove, New Jersey. It's the kind of place where nothing ever really happens, which is why I never thought anything could go wrong, especially on Thanksgiving. This year, I was hosting dinner for my family, including my parents and my younger brother, Lucas. It was supposed to be a night of laughter, food, and gratitude, but it turned into something none of us will ever forget. We'd just finished dinner and were digging into dessert when the doorbell rang. At first, I thought it might be one of our neighbors dropping by to say hello. When I opened the door, a man I didn't recognize stood on the porch. He looked to be in his 40s, unshaven and wearing a dirty jacket. His eyes darted nervously as he spoke. "Hey, sorry to bother you," he said, his voice rough. "My car broke down a few blocks away. My phone's dead. Mind if I use your phone to call for help?" There was something off about him. Maybe it was the way he avoided eye contact, or how he kept glancing over my shoulder, trying to see inside the house. Every instinct in me screamed to turn him away. But it was Thanksgiving, and I didn't want to seem heartless. Reluctantly, I told him he could step inside, but only for a moment. He stood in the hallway, just a few steps from the dining room where my family was sitting. I handed him the landline, and he fumbled with it awkwardly. As he pretended to make a call, his eyes roamed the house, lingering on my wife and kids. Jenna shot me a nervous look, and I felt my stomach tighten. "You okay there?" I asked, trying to keep my tone calm but firm. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he hung up the phone and muttered. No one picked up. Then, with a faint smirk, he added, "Nice family you got here. Big house too." "Thanks," I replied, my unease growing. "Look, if you need help, I can call a tow truck for you. But I think it's time for you to head out." His expression darkened. "You know, people like you don't know how lucky you are. You sit here in your warm houses, eating your fancy meals, while others are out there struggling." I didn't know what to say, but before I could respond, he slammed the front door behind him and disappeared into the night. I locked the door immediately and tried to shake off the encounter. My family was visibly shaken, but I assured them everything was fine. Later that night, after everyone had left and the kids were in bed, I decided to double-check the house. Something about that man just wouldn't leave my mind. As I walked past the kitchen, I noticed the back door was unlocked. I was certain I had locked it earlier. I stepped outside with a flashlight and scanned the yard. That's when I saw it, a broken basement window. My heart dropped. Muddy footprints trailed from the window to the basement door. I rushed back inside and grabbed a kitchen knife before creeping down the basement stairs. The air was cold, and the faint smell of damp concrete made it hard to breathe. I called out, "Who's down here?" But there was no response. In the far corner, behind a stack of boxes, I saw movement. My hands trembled as I inched closer. Suddenly, the man from earlier bolted out of the shadows, knocking me to the ground. He ran up the stairs and out the back door before I could stop him. The police arrived minutes later, but by then, he was long gone. They told me he'd probably been inside the house before he ever rang the doorbell, watching us and waiting for the right moment to make his move. Knowing he had been there the whole time, listening to our laughter, watching my kids, it still makes my skin crawl. Now, every time I hear the doorbell, I feel a knot in my stomach. Thanksgiving will never feel the same again.